One child is more than enough. I never expected to be told that I was no longer required by my parents, who cherished my intelligent sister. You don't have to fail like that. We could reconsider if you could cover the $1,000 monthly rent because Sandy needs a lot of money to develop her skills. My parents made the decision to exclude me from the house when I was still a small child. My uncle contacted me to offer help, but I was unable to conceal my doubts. He said, "Even though I'm poor, I would really like to be your parent, if you don't mind, Emily." I immediately accepted his offer. I call myself Emily, although I am 30 years old now. My background is complicated. Please listen to my account before discussing my family surroundings. My mother stayed at home, and my father was a normal salaryman. We shared a house with my grandparents at the family home of my father, where my single uncle also resided. When I was 4 years old, I moved in with my uncle. At that time, he was 24. While living at home at that age might not be too rare, my uncle had unique circumstances that prevented him from leaving the house. He'd been weak since childhood and still suffered from health issues as an adult, which made it challenging for him to keep consistent employment. His life turned out to be one of erratic part-time employment, not enough money for him to survive on his own. Maybe feeling inadequate since he relied on his parents, my uncle constantly looked guilty. Often, I heard my father screaming at my uncle, "You really are a burden." Such events limited themselves to times when my grandparents were not around. Without prejudice, my grandparents loved their sickly son and healthy son equally. My father seemed to want to act humbly in front of his parents since he was living together and had a lower income because of the recession. But in their absence, my father was constantly nasty, dismissive, and mocking of my uncle. Observing this, my uncle would simply seem depressed. He never would have become furious or responded negatively. "Why do you not get angry?" I once inquired innocuously. When looking perplexed, my uncle said, "Because I really am receiving support from my parents." I used to embrace that thinking as a youngster. Now, as an adult, I believe my father was getting the same encouragement. Thus, he had no right to complain. Had I known then, I would have backed my uncle. Not understanding it as a child, I felt awkward when my father yelled at my uncle, but was unable to speak up. True, the mood was calm while my grandparents were around. My father would suppress his feelings and act accordingly, while my uncle would smile pleasantly under their observation. Too preoccupied tending to my small sister and me, my mother neglected to notice the interaction between my father and my uncle. I thought these days would endure eternity when I was a small child, but still, our daily lives took a surprising turn. When I was 6 years old, my grandparents passed away in an accident. Deep sadness and loneliness drove my sister and me to cry terribly. I definitely recall my uncle also discreetly crying. Still, I cannot forget my father's laughing. Indeed, he was laughing. He never sobbed, not even when we hurried to the hospital or during funeral preparation, despite the death of his own parents. Not only was he calm, even as a little child, I could tell my father was not grieving. That belief only got stronger on the funeral day. Thinking nobody was watching, my father was chuckling in secret. I happened to glance at his face only once and could definitely capture his mood. It was a smile of real delight, the kind of satisfaction I, as his daughter, could identify, not a chuckle born of uncertainty or grief. The demise of my grandparents made my father inwardly happy. Most likely, he was thinking of the financial advantages. As a toddler, that smile made me cry, since it was quite nasty and felt horrible. Maybe it was tears for the passing of my grandparents. My uncle placed his hand on my shoulder and softly caressed it with a loving motion. Tears rimmed my eyes, yet my uncle's eyes gazed over me gently, even if they were sad. Why was this so? Less than though they were blood brothers, my father and uncle reacted rather differently to the death of our parents. My doubts regarding my father were stronger at that period. Later on, my father's behavior underwent notable transformation. His attitude toward my uncle became especially icy, and he would say things like, "Why should I have to look after a useless guy like you? You should be appreciative simply to be allowed to live here." He also said I should take all the inheritance if I couldn't even pay rent. Though at the time, I didn't realize it. These remarks were obviously unfair. Legally, siblings should split inheritance equally. Instead, my father aimed to control it. My uncle was strong enough to challenge him, and if needed, he could have turned to legal action. Still, my uncle decided against it. He had a depressed expression, but did not object or assert his fair part of the inheritance. Concerned about my uncle, who seemed to have lost his will, I questioned, "Are you okay?" "I'm frail, and things aren't going well with my job, so it can't be helped," he said weakly, smiling. My uncle's weak state got worse day after day from verbal abuse from my father, which caused weight loss and pale skin. Still, my uncle constantly encouraged me not to worry, smiling at me. But 3 months after my grandparents died, my uncle was finally ejected from the house. "You are useless. Get out," my father remarked. My uncle vanished without saying or doing anything. "Uncle, keep away," I begged, desperate. I tugged at his arm, but he took his hand from mine, gently sat it on my shoulder, and murmured, "Don't worry, Emily. You have strength. You will be all right even without me." "But I worry about you," I said, tears in my eyes. Having to live on his own worried me about my uncle, who was not healthy and unable to find consistent employment. I stared at him with tears in my eyes, and he whispered, "It's okay," and turned away. Although my uncle's parting was quite depressing, there was nothing a small child like me could do. I soon discovered that I couldn't afford to worry about others. 2 years following the death of my grandparents, the 8-year-old me was routinely attending elementary school, and my 6-year-old sister Sandy was about to start hers. It all began when my mother said Sandy had been commended for her kindergarten intelligence. My father exclaimed enthusiastically and hastily decided to have her take an IQ test. This intelligence must definitely be inherited from me. The results, an IQ of 150, amazed all of us. "This is my DNA," my father said proudly. One could see the outstanding IQ of 150. Though I couldn't quite appreciate what made this so amazing, I knew my sister was quite brilliant. "That's fantastic, Sandy," I remarked. "Thanks, big sis," Sandy said, grinning broadly as I casually complimented her. Those were really wonderful years. The next developments were the worst. "All right, let her take entrance tests," my father said. The abruptness startled my mother, but her father's unwarranted confidence, "If she's talented, it will be fine," pushed her forward. My mother soon also started to get enthusiastic. My sister began attending daily tutoring, and from then on, my mother accompanied her. Hence, housework was sometimes overlooked, and I became the one bearing responsibility. "You will take care of the house since your mother and Sandy are busy," I was told. My everyday schedule started to include cleaning and laundry. I was out of time to play. After school, my parents would punish me if I skipped straight home and neglected the tasks. Days started to show where I would miss meals since I hadn't cleaned. You're not successful. We cannot afford time for you. I was chastised. Why can't you get perfect scores? My father routinely asked about my grades. My mother would say, "Really, can't you be a bit more like your sister?" My parents neither congratulated me nor paid attention, even if I performed exceptionally in sports or on tests. I was turned aside all the time. "Be like your sister, Sandy," sounded like mechanical repetition. They would include patronizing comments like, "You cannot be a genius. Sandy is one. You simply are lazy." Sandy was talented and progressed remarkably fast under instruction, passing the entrance tests in no time at all. My parents became even colder toward me. They spared Sandy no expenses at all. I had to make do with clothes that had gotten too small since I couldn't get new ones. Sandy ate great food while I had leftovers. Sandy traveled, and I stayed here to keep an eye on the house. My parents obviously preferred just Sandy. "This child shows a bright future. She will guarantee our old age," my father said. "Should we potentially make her a lawyer or a doctor?" Not bad, either would be becoming a politician, my mother thought. "We are quite fortunate to have such a gifted daughter," my father replied with pride. My parents ignored my existence, and my tears behind Sandy went unseen. Then, at 10 years old, my parents made a chilly pronouncement. "One kid is enough. Unlike you, we do not require a failure. Sandy requires a lot of money to blossom her talents. Thus, if you could pay the $1,000 monthly rent, we might change our minds," they added. "What?" I became confused. "You're saying that one child, Sandy, is plenty." My father said that was not feasible alone. "What am I meant to do?" I inquired. "Why not you ask your uncle? We shall give you some pocket money for now. Figure it out on your own," they said, handing me a small amount of cash, and I was kicked out of the house. I notice how small they seem now, though they're only in their 50s. They look like they're well into their 60s or 70s. You're the ones who said it yourselves, didn't you? That Sandy was. Enough with your genius daughter. There's no reason for you to come see me now. Well, it's not so simple anymore. My father grumbles. Dicing. Did something happen to Sandy? What? Did she end up in trouble or something? She became a lawyer. Then, there's no problem, right? That's amazing. Just what you'd expect from someone with an IQ of 150. Oh, or so we thought until she suddenly disappeared. I blinked, taken aback. Disappeared? She left a note saying, "I won't be taking care of you two," and then she just vanished. That's quite surprising. I paused, trying to digest that information. Sandy had graduated from law school, passed the bar, and was well on her way to success. So why would she leave after all that? She's abandoned you. I say, my tone flat. Congratulations. There's nothing to celebrate, my father snaps. That ungrateful child. After all we did to raise her, this is how she repays us? Well, I guess that's what happens when true love is lacking, I replied. My parents might have showered Sandy with excessive attention, but I imagine it felt like suffocating control to her. Parents who changed their behavior based on an IQ score, parents who burdened their children with unrealistic expectations, Parents who disguised their selfish desires as affection. It's no wonder she grew fed up with that. Environment. My father? Grimaces. Actually, the company went under. I snickered. Well, given the times, that's not surprising. We barely got any severance pay. The unemployment benefits are about to run out. That's great news, I say, sarcastically, unable to hide my disinterest. It's not great at all. It's hard enough trying to find a new job at our age, my mother adds, frustration clear in her voice. Sounds rough. That's why we want you to take care of us, my father suddenly demands. His words wiped the smile off my face in an instant. No. What did you say? How can you just abandon your parents like that? The only real parent I have is my uncle, who took care of me after you threw me away. What? My father looked speechless, caught off guard by my response. You knew I was living with my uncle when you came to this apartment, didn't you? So why are you acting surprised now? Do you really think of him as your father? My uncle, who gave me genuine love, is my true father. My words sting, and I can see it in their stunned expressions. Even though he was sick and weak, my uncle worked hard to support me. I wanted to repay him, so I worked hard. Wait, does that mean you actually have a proper job? Well, kind of, I shrugged. Suddenly, my father grabbed my shoulder tightly. Let go of me, I said, through gritted teeth. So you're angry and a bit embarrassed too, aren't you? Please listen to what I'm saying. No need to listen. I understand it all. I pushed his hand away. You were lonely, weren't you? You're sulking because only Sandy got all the attention, right? But deep down, you're happy to see your parents aren't you. Stop creating your own story. Suddenly seeming almost desperate, my father added, don't worry. From now on, we'll be proper parents and stay by your side. Blinking, completely perplexed by his statements, was he lost? Would this be a first indication of dementia? I laughed. Suddenly, after briefly staring at both of them, their features sincere yet silly. Why are you laughing? Clearly not understanding my reaction, my father remarked. Is it because you're happy? Ha ha, not at all, I said between the laughing. Just so you know, I never once gave either of you any thought. Throughout the past 10 years, I had a great life because of my uncle. Their shock at my outburst was evident. I went on, the fact leaking out, like a dam at last, breaking. Actually, I graduated from university, having received a scholarship. Oh, quite, indeed. Then you have to have entered a decent company, my mother said, attempting to sound proud. Yeah, I did. I found work with a reputable company. Her excitement returning, she remarked, that's great to hear, and via an unanticipated relationship, I also got married. Oh, I must then meet your spouse. Extend pleasantries, my mother said, sharply. No, that won't be necessary. No? It's only great that I should, she insisted. That is not feasible. He is now abroad. Oh, I understand. Wait, what? And by the way, Uncle is also foreign. Your uncle? Also. My mother seemed more perplexed than ever. You seem to be living here alone. I decided your sickly uncle had. Already. Don't assume he's dead. Go. Instead, I took a quick snap. He accepted. A job assignment overseas, as it would be, in a location suitable for his medical condition. Right now, he's contentedly playing with my children. You have kids too. My parents clearly found the flood of surprises difficult to handle. I grinned. Brilliantly. Yes, Uncle consented even. Though he first wasn't really interested in living with us, we are all living contentedly as one family now. Desperate to keep up, my father said, well, in that case, we could move overseas, too. Yes, go ahead. Nevertheless, I won't be looking after you, and we won't live together. You are free to spend your own money any way you like. That's not feasible. You truly are going to desert your parents, he insisted. You were the ones who dropped me first. I muttered, my patience at last breaking. Their self-interest had no limitations. Their features went white as my comments seemed to strike them like a brick. I have no thankfulness toward you for anything, I said, my voice steady. But I owe everything to my uncle. From now on, I intend to pay him back for all he's done for me. That may be true, my mother hesitated, but at least send us a little money. Please. My uncle never touched the money. I forwarded to him. He spent his entire life in this ancient flat. He now accepted to leave and live with us abroad, though I'm here just finishing the documentation. Who are you leaving? My father gave a terrified glance. Yes, I answered, feeling finally precise. The procedure is already underway. I'm just returning the keys, and then on my way back home. But how about us? Just going to leave your mother and me behind? His voice broke as he asked. I nodded with absolute clarity, grinning as I passed them. I murmured, "Thank you for abandoning me. Really, thank you. You make me happy right now." With those last remarks, I left them, stunned, standing there. I didn't hold out for answers. This felt to be the real farewell to my biological parents. I then went back home, overseas, though my life with my uncle had been one of diligence and endurance. That effort paid off after landing a fantastic position at a respectable firm. I met the man I would be marrying, working overseas. When I married, my uncle shed happy tears. Subsequently, we had children. We asked him to live with us, and today, our family is all contentedly together. My husband, our kids, and naturally, Uncle, as my sister Sandy stood beside me. Seeing the children in the garden, she murmured, "I hope I can meet someone wonderful like you did." "Don't worry, you'll find someone fantastic," I told her. "You are at last free from our parents' influence." Sandy grinned in relief. Having said that, I really have to get used to this new employment. Why not seek a law license in this nation? I indicated, oh, I'm not interested in being a lawyer. She moaned. I have enough of following our parents' wishes. I would like to work in a field I genuinely like. Like you are, I said. Sandy had sent me a letter outlining her suffering under the weight of their too high expectations. After our parents left her, we planned to meet covertly with the help of my uncle. Although my sister wished to live with us, Uncle's financial position would not allow both of us. Sandy therefore lived with our parents till she could leave on her own. She did it. She acquired her freedom. It was not easy for her, and now I know she will be good, even if she is still adjusting to the new language and surroundings. She is tenacious. Nobody else works as hard as my sister does. Regarding Uncle, he intends to start a language school right now. His health has so greatly improved that I wish he could fully enjoy his life. You are rather correct. Learning never comes too late, Sandy added with a smile. Conversely, our parents fast squandered their inheritance thanks to home renovation loans. They sold their house, but were left with little once their employment were lost. They have lately been pleading with relatives for assistance, but nobody is willing. They are impoverished, and I heard them quarrel continuously. Despite my sadness, I have no pity. Considering everything I added, I feel that favoritism should never exist between siblings or unjust treatment of one's offspring. Sandy gave another nod. You're entirely correct. I'll always be. I'm here to help, Sandy said. Whatever. Turns out that you've already done more, as opposed to essential. Big. Thank you very much. Sis, I began to cry after realizing how much my sister had grown up. I felt a hand on my shoulder. Suddenly, even though it was tiny today, it felt warm. I squinted as I turned around, weeping. Thank you, I smiled and whispered. Hey, Uncle understood what I was saying. Startling. Thanks, Dad. Sweetheart.